But you're also working on a project, which is the reason that I contacted you about how all of us might be able to learn how to give our dogs better, more quality of lives. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would love to. So the project that I'm involved with is called the Dog Aging Project. And what the goal of this project is it's a nationwide longitudinal and mostly observational study. And so kind of what that means is all across the country, we want to just follow dogs as they age and to get as much information from them over that time as possible. We want to see, so we'll collect things like genetic information. What's their lifestyle like? What kind of home do they live in? What's their environment? Who do they interact with? And then continue to get that information and see how these dogs age and how they grow. And our goal is to see, does that influence how they age? But then also we share a lot of the environments with these dogs. We experience the same things they do. And so this is kind of a far off project and certainly beyond me, but there is the potential for, what we find in dogs can also help humans too, because that dog lifespan is, tragically, but it's kind of on a fast forward a bit. But so we can see some of these changes that might take, tens of years in humans to occur in dogs over a much shorter period of time. And so that's another aspect of this. But, at least on our end, and certainly on my end, my main interest with this is the sort of the dog facing aspect of it is what can we learn from these dogs and how can we benefit them?
And this is a 10-year project with 10,000 dogs. And the goal is to gather a giant amount of data around and not interfering in any way in these dogs' lives. You just go, okay,
Nope.
These dogs are living this life with these people in this place, and they have these genetic markers, these behaviors or whatever, and build this huge pool of data to learn from and draw conclusions from at the end about how we can approach dog aging and dog quality of life better.
Absolutely. And so it's interesting because when we first started, we did say that we wanted 10,000 dogs, and that was kind of to us in our mind that lofty goal. Like if only we could get to that number. But what actually happened is, people, I think we know they love their dogs, but they were really excited and enthusiastic about the opportunity to participate in this study. So the 10,000 dogs that we were initially shooting for quickly transitioned to, we're just trying to enroll tens of thousands of dogs. And now it's gotten to the point where there is no cap. So we had initially it had seemed like that was our goal. That was our hope. And with, everyone's awesome support of the project, we've been able to far exceed that, which, in our minds is the more dogs we can have enrolled, the more dogs we can learn from, the better. And the things that we are asking them are, they're, because I think it's easier to think sort of in terms of humans. Like when we think of a longitudinal study and just following an organism as it lives and seeing what happens and seeing what develops, it's actually something that we don't really do in dogs. And so all these studies in humans, so, whenever we think of human heart disease, we think about the risk factors that go along with that. Things like, obesity, smoking, these things, they were determined by successful and large longitudinal studies in humans. And so that's another goal of ours, is that we want to look at data like that, but for dogs, and see, can we start to draw these associations or these correlations and maybe start to have some things revealed to us that we would not have been able to find otherwise.
That's a neat way to look at that, because when you think about that with humans versus dogs, you're right. I mean, we have these things we know are good for humans and not good for humans, and we have long-term data to pull from. When you're talking about, the original goal of 10,000 dogs and exceeding that, because people are so into their pets and so into their dogs, and like it would be very hard to be against this research, right? Like if you love
Right.
dogs, you're gonna love this. Is there a bias there? Are you worried about a bias there where you're getting people who are, the kind of pet owner who might volunteer their pet information for this study might also be the kind of person who's, taking their dog to the vet every time they can and really taking maybe better care? Is that why it's such a large pool?
Well, so in regards to your first question, absolutely. We are concerned about bias. There's, we're still kind of as the data rolls in, we don't have any kind of final say on the trends, but we're already starting to see there are certain populations of people, certain areas that are responding much more enthusiastically than others, and so I think as we grow, it's something that I'd never even considered starting this position, but it's a real factor that to truly have a study that's representative of, every person as well as every dog, we have to make special efforts to reach out to certain groups, or to reach out to certain type sizes of dogs, or certain regions and locations. And so there is a bias there. And even something as simple as we made it to where we tried to make it as easily accessible as possible by making it this online form. But very understandably, there's a large amount of people that just don't have access to consistent internet. And so even things like that, we acknowledge and we try to combat it as we can. But there are some things that, we unfortunately just have to kind of acknowledge as a limit. But the hope is, as we're able to reach out to more people, those limitations of we're only getting certain populations of people will be less and less apparent. So that's kind of the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's no perfect. You can't even get perfection in a lab setting a lot of times.
Right.
So this is, and the scope of this is tremendous, and it's also interesting that this is not, you mentioned off air, there's been some studies like this with golden retrievers and maybe specific breeds. This is not breed specific. This is not owner specific. This is Chihuahuas to Great Danes and people all over, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there is no limit to the number of dogs that we want to work with, or the types of dogs that we want to work with. There's going to be dogs that have chronic diseases. There's going to be dogs that are completely healthy. There's going to be sick dogs, happy dogs, mean dogs. For us, the more variety that we have, the better. If in a morbid way, if you only had very healthy, happy dogs, it wouldn't be probably there wouldn't be that much to learn from that population, unless you also have, every other dog in between. And particularly the size of dogs is really interesting. So you said Great Danes to Chihuahuas. The ways that they age differently is something that has always been kind of fascinating to the veterinary field. And so we certainly would love things like a large variety of dog sizes, as well as temperaments, diseases. We want them all.
Mm-hmm.
And just to kind of touch on what you had mentioned before, you were right that the vast majority of this study, there might be smaller studies or components that require things that would normally be gotten at like a veterinary visit. So nothing really experimental. And then there is a smaller portion where there is kind of a clinical trial, but the vast majority is this observational. So the dogs they don't even need to leave their homes for the most part. It is owners. We will never, no matter how much we like our patients, we'll never be able to tell an owner more about their dog than they can tell us. Mm-hmm. And so when you start this project with us, the first thing you'll encounter is this health and life experience survey. And that is basically a large battery. It would be dishonest to say it wasn't large, but a large battery of questions that we are really trying to learn those questions that they ask humans that we just haven't really seen. So, what is the floor of your house? How old is your house? What does your dog eat? Are they aggressive? Just a vast variety of questions, so that we can try to get as much of this data about your dog as possible. And one of the also, I think, interesting things about it is, do we know what we're going to do with all that data? We don't know what correlations we'll find. That's kind of there's an aspect of this that's we call like big data, but there's an aspect of this where we don't know what particularly we're looking for, but our hope is if we're able to capture all this information, that when we know specific questions that we want to ask, it will be there. And so that's kind of, when someone encounters all these questions, there might be the idea of like, why are you asking what the plumbing pipes in my house consist of? There are studies in humans that show that potentially copper exposure from certain plumbing pipes can be associated with Alzheimer's. And so, it's really is, we are trying to kind of generate this foundational database of information, thorough information on dogs across the country, so we can hopefully look at that for years.